Campfire Story.
My mom and dad were going somewhere and will come back in a few hours, while my uncle is coming.
Hey, lil bro, where is mom and dad going?
My older sister asked. I don't know, but Uncle James is coming over, I said. Then my sister looked frustrated.
Why is he coming over?
I don't know, I think to watch us.
Look, I'm 17, you're 6, so I'm the one to be watching you.
I don't know, but I'm excited for him to come over.
You know what, I'm going into my room. If you need anything, I'm up there.
Okay, I said. In the excitement watching the movie, suddenly I heard something in the basement. I decided to look and I went down to the basement. I opened the closet door and I saw Uncle James' body in the closet. I ran upstairs to my sister's room until I saw her dead body. I screamed until I felt something touch me. I turned around and I saw an old woman until it went black. I woke up in the hospital. They were asking questions and I told them what happened, but they didn't believe me. Ever since that day, I missed my older sister, but I will never ever go to the basement again. The end.
Campfire Story.
One night when I was about 17, I was home alone with my younger brother Jared. I am that kind of guy that is always ready for self-defense, and it can be proved as I have a pocket knife almost always on me. My parents were away that night for dinner as a celebration for their second engagement. It was about 12 p.m. and I was watching TV. Jared was asleep in his room, but I thought that it was the other way around. Jared usually stays up a bit later when our parents aren't home. It was almost every time that he played on his Game Boy. But this time I could hear stomping and loud thuds almost echoing in my head. I called out to him saying that he had to go to bed or else I would call mom. When I usually pull out the "I'm going to call mom" card, he would listen. And after about 20 or so minutes I would hear snoring. But this time I could still hear the sound of Mario saying, "It's a me, Mario," so I called out again. But louder. This time I could hear loud and heavy footsteps coming from his room. I got concerned and walked up the stairs. Something felt off when I went up the stairs. It was a feeling of fear and anger almost. And the feeling came onto me stronger when I could hear muffled sobbing and almost screeches. When I heard that, I ran up the stairs and slammed the door open to come and see on Jared. When I came in, Jared was on his bed with a sock wrapped tightly around his head, covering his mouth. His arms were tied together and was tightly strapped on the bed frame. Jared's bed had these wooden poles reaching up to the ceiling. He was crying, his tears forming a puddle on the floor, and he was trying to scream. I ran over to him and comforted him as I removed the sock. When he could speak, he yelled at the closet saying, "Come out, you fuck." I was shocked at what he said and asked him what the hell was going on. The answer he gave me was just pointing at the closet. My heart started to race as I walked over to the closet. Every heartbeat almost as a ticking bomb. As I opened the closet door, Jared covered himself with his cover, and I would do the same. The door creaked and I backed up, but when it was fully open, there was no one there. It was just his clothes and some overcovers that were too dirty for him to use. I looked back at him in an angry gesture, but my face stunned when I felt a hand grip hard on my shoulder. I could feel his breath on my neck, and I knew that was just oxygen, but it felt like knives digging themselves deeper into my neck. I turned around and a man loomed over me. He seemed normal till I looked at his face. There were stitches and holes in it. I screamed and fell on the floor. I took out my pocket knife and stabbed him in the gut. He fell to the floor with a loud thud and I threw up. Jared screamed and cried so much that the cover was soaked in tears. I stood up, vomit dripping from my mouth. I asked him for his little cell phone so he could call our parents when he peed the bed. He gave it to me rather quickly and I called Dad. He answered and I told what had happened. I also told him to call the cops, and he wasn't reluctant at all and hung up. I put the phone on the floor and sat on Jared's bed to comfort him. We both fell asleep and woke up when the cops busted the door open. I started to cry in joy. The cops ran up the stairs and they found the body. Jared didn't remember how the man got in, but still had one question. What were those loud thuds coming from Jared's room?
Campfire Story.
I worked for a gang that does bad things to people. One time we shot the tires off this van, pulled out the guy. As he tried to fight us off, It didn't go well, but at his last he said run. We looked in the van and found a child. He runned out of the van. We tried chasing him, but he got away. 10 years passed after that, and when we were doing the best ever deal that would change the gang for years, but that would be the night the gang folded. As we were at the place, it didn't seem right. The other gang we were dealing with were gone, and there was blood everywhere. We had to know what happened, so we searched but I realized a lot of the gang members were despairing, until one of my guys found something that'll haunt me to this day. We found one of the gang members we were dealing with was decapitated. Then I saw it. I ordered everyone to shoot it, but every shot just went past it like it was some smoke. But when I got closer, in a blink of an eye, it would go close to my men, killing them one by one. When I was the last alive, I knew I couldn't fight it, so ran. As I was running, I see it, but it wasn't moving. A few hours passed, and I was in the middle of the forest. I thought I was safe, but no, I wasn't. As I blinked, it was in front of me. Then I felt a katana go right through me. I screamed for help. Then as fast as lightning, it kicked me down to the floor. I butt my back against a tree. As it came closer, it dumped down and said something that will haunt me to this day.
This is for what you did to me 10 years ago, but it'll spare you. I want to see you suffer.
As it said that, I didn't know what I did, but then I remembered. It must have been that kid from 10 years ago. As soon as I fought that, it pulled the katana out of me and cleaned it with his part of its armor on its arm. As soon as it did that, it put the katana in its holster, then walked away. Ever since that, I quit my job as a gang member and started a new life. Now I've got a wife and 4 kids. It's been 5 years since that happened, and I'm still scared that it is still out there. To this day, I thought no one would believe me, but when you came to me to ask about it, because the world needs to know about it, and to this day I will know it by its name, Ghost.
Campfire Story.
The magician knows that what they are doing is by way of sleight of hand. They don't pretend otherwise, but they create an illusion of the magical, of the supernatural, of the special. This magician stood at the stage with his ravishing assistant Rhiannon, and he marveled at the faces of the stunned children and teens. It never ceased to amaze him that after all of these years, he still had the power to wow. Rhiannon jumped inside the crate. The magician put a saw through the middle of the box and split the box into 2. He put Rhiannon inside one of those cages you get at the zoo, threw a sheet over the cage, then pulled the sheet back and Rhiannon vanished. The magician then reversed the trick and Rhiannon was back. The magician was an artist. The crowd yelled and cheered. Thank you, the magician said. The magician was also a local man named Lawrence. He ran a local butcher shop. He volunteered within the community. He didn't have children himself, and he lived in a big house on Bunker Avenue. The house had 6 bedrooms and its own wine cellar. 5 to 6 times a year, Lawrence painted his face white, wore a purple robe, hired a local girl from the newspaper, and performed for all the kiddies in the area. Lawrence was likable, generous with his time, and kind. People in the community trusted Lawrence. They trusted Lawrence and loved the magician. After the show, people thanked Lawrence personally and complimented the magician. It took Lawrence a whole to differentiate between the two after the show. He hugged all the kids and they all adored the magician. After that, he was back to being just Lawrence again. Plain old boring Lawrence. But Lawrence could still conjure up his own magic tricks. Rhiannon sat on the sofa with a margarita and complimented Lawrence on his big house. She had those innocent, hungry eyes that the girls sometimes get. Lawrence snuck up behind her with his magic saw. He'd slipped back into that purple robe and put the black eyeliner over his eyelids. This performance didn't have an audience. Lawrence's first magic trick was the sleeping spell. It was cast in the margarita. It wasn't magic, of course. It was sleight of hand. The next magic trick was sawing in half. Except it wasn't in half. It was in about 27 separate pieces. And then there was making the girl disappear. That would involve quicklime and concrete. But the real magic was convincing the agency that the girl simply never turned up and probably ran off somewhere else to find a new job. The magician was loved by the community for his sleight of hand and false conjuring. But it was Lawrence that really made people disappear. 27 of them so far. 28 after Rhiannon.
Campfire Story.
This happened when I was about 15. It was at night and I was sitting in the living room reading a book till I saw a shadow move by the window. I dropped my book with a loud thud and walked over to the window and searched for the shadow. I saw it go into our backyard shed. That shed had always been a creepy place to me, not only its backstory. At the time, I didn't know about it because when we bought the house, I was only 5 years old. The people who lived in our house before had a guy who lived in the shed. They would feed him the restovers and sometimes invited him in for a shower. But when they sold the house to us, he was apparently missing. They had reported him to the police to search for him, but apparently he had done some pretty fucked up things. He was a convicted pedophile and sex offender and would usually stay at people's house to later roofie their kids and rape them. And now I saw a shadow wander into the shed. I was scared shitless. My heart started to race, and I would have called out to my parents if I wasn't home alone. It was in my hands to see who this person was. At first, I just wanted to wait for my parents to get back home. But I didn't for some goddamn reason. It wasn't the right choice at all since it was midnight, and the person looked to be a full-grown man, judging by the person's body shape. I eventually got confidence to go out and bust this guy. I walked to the hallway and started to put on my jacket, but stopped when I got the feeling of being stared at. My heart stopped as I looked at the window. There was a guy with eyes wide open staring blankly at me. I screamed and unintentionally knocked over a vase that sat on a little table by the coat hanger. The crash from the vase was surprisingly enough for our neighbors to hear. I saw their lights turn on through the window, but that didn't stop the man from staring at me. His face was still pressed hardly against the window, but I couldn't see his face, just his eyes. I crawled away as my tears soaked my white t-shirt. But as I crawled away, I saw a blue and red light looming over the guy's face. I could see it clearly now. It was pale with stitches around the eyes and mouth. He had long dark brown hair with a hole in his forehead. I stood up with tears running down my cheeks dripping on the floor and walked over to the window and knocked on it. The guy didn't even blink. I knocked even harder, and the weak knock soon became me banging on the window. While I was banging on the window, someone knocked on the door. It was the cops. While I stood up, the guy slumped down on the ground. I opened the door crying and saw two policemen. They came in and I fell on my knees. One of the cops comforted me as the other one questioned what had happened. I told him about the guy staring at me and the figure running to the backyard shed. The cops' faces froze in place as I just sat there on my knees not knowing about the history of the shed. The cop who comforted me stood up and said that he would just check outside. I nodded and he went on his way. It was quiet for some seconds before the cop screamed in pain. Me and the cop walked out to check on the cop, but he was gone. The only thing we could see was a tall and pale figure with blood and guts all over his mouth. Subscribe or I will haunt your house. If you like this video, please do comment, like, and subscribe for more. Thanks for hearing. See you in the next one.